There's no clear answer as to when and how the current war in the Middle East will end, or whether it will reach a conclusive outcome in the foreseeable future. President Trump says that Iran is decimated and begging for a deal. The Islamic Republic, for its part, remains defiant, insisting it will not yield to external pressure, utilizing the Strait of Hormuz as one of its key strategic levers. Israel, meanwhile, appears to favor the continuation of joint military pressure, expressing deep skepticism towards any negotiated arrangement with Tehran. In the midst of these competing narratives and the wider geopolitical angst engulfing the region and beyond, I'm joined today by the representative of one of the key protagonists in this conflict, the ambassador of the State of Israel to Azerbaijan, His Excellency Ronen Klaus. Ambassador, welcome to AnewZ, and thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
A lot has happened since 28th of February. A lot is happening on a regular basis, on a daily basis. I mean, one thing is very clear. Israel has been incredibly ruthless and effective in terms of its decapitation strikes. Iran is considerably weakened, but the Islamic Republic of Iran is still alive. And optics that we get from Tehran give rise to the impression that population is very supportive of Tehran. And Tehran is retaliating. They even retaliated against Azerbaijan's Nakhchivan airport, against the Gulf region. Is this a scenario you expected, and are you happy with what's happening now?
Well, yes, indeed. This campaign has started on the 28th of February, so we are well into the second month of this campaign, and the same goals that Israel had at the beginning, together with our colleagues and partners, the Americans, are the same. We're still continuing the same actions in order to remove any threat, any existential threat imposed by Iran on Israel, which unfortunately we have seen for the last 47 years. Too many statements coming from Iran calling for the destruction of Israel. This is something that cannot continue, and we will continue to do whatever we are capable to in order to remove this threat, existential threat from Israel. This is one. The second goal of our campaign, military campaign, is to remove the threat of ballistic missiles. Unfortunately, we have seen thousands of missiles being fired, not only at Israel, but also on 14 other countries surrounding Iran, and furthermore, even in Europe. One thing that we have said for many years, that the threat of missiles, ballistic missiles, is not only aimed at Israel, but it is also aimed at Europe, and we have seen evidence to that. And the third goal is to remove any kind of assistance which is being given by Iran to the proxies forces which are surrounding Israel, mainly Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, Houthis in Yemen, and others, which also impose a threat not only on us, but also on the neighboring countries. And hopefully, if these continued efforts by both Israel and the United States will continue and will allow to bring the regime, the Iranian regime, to a point in which there will be conditions which will be given, which will be introduced to the Iranian people to take control of their own faith, to take control of their own future. Hopefully we will see a change, a real change in the regime that will eventually bring a change to the stability and to the hope for a better future for the entire region.
We'll come to a point about Iranian population, what they want, to what extent they're actually interested in anything which we could academically define as a regime change a bit later. How aligned are you with your US partners? Because impression we have is that you talk about a state of Iran as a source of existential threat, whereas they talk about Iran as a country which is deeply problematic, but also the country which should be forced into a situation when it will not be able to project power beyond its borders. Whereas your case seems to be very different. How aligned are you with your US allies when it comes to the fulfillment of those objectives?
So I think that this is a really unique example of how two nations are looking at a problem and trying to cope and bring to a solution together. The cooperation, the mutual understanding, the meetings, the correspondence between both armies and on the political level is ongoing. Of course, that there are sometimes different ways to look at things, because we're still talking here about two different countries. But at the end of the day, I think that both the United States and Israel understand that Iran, the way that Iran functions today, the way that Iran looks at both, as they call it, the big devil, the United States, and the small devil, Israel, should not continue to exist. It cannot continue to exist. It needs to be removed, not only for the sake of Israelis and the rest of the world, but also for the sake of the Iranian people.
Ambassador, it has been suggested that it's very difficult to establish with any degree of certainty who is in charge of Iran, who is in charge of the Islamic Republic of Iran. We know that the supreme leader was killed on the 28th of February, very influential and charismatic, a leader of the National Security Council, secretary of that particular body, Ali Larijani, quite often described as the intellectual spine of the system there, was killed as well. Does it really matter to you, to your country, who is in charge of this country?
Well, I think that the most important thing will be to identify a change in the way of thinking in the regime which controls Iran. If it's the same, more of the same thinking, more of the same ideology, more of the same goals which are taking control of the way of thinking in the top levels of the regime, it means that there has not been any change and the threat still exists and very much possesses the main influential opportunities or goals of the regime. But if we will see some kind of an understanding or some kind of a change in the way that the new leadership or new people who will come into force will inject or will project towards the partners, us, the Americans, I think that then we will understand that maybe there is a perspective for a change, for a positive change.
So you mean that a reformed version of the Islamic Republic of Iran, with a changed attitude towards Israel, would be something that you consider as a potential interlocutor? We're not talking about what you call regime change, but a reformed version of Islamic Republic of Iran. Would that be a distinct possibility, you think?
I hope, because at the end, what we are dealing with is with a radical and a terrorist ideology which has controlled Iran for the last 47 years, which has to be replaced with an ideology or a way of thinking that the West, that the Americans, that Israel, that other parties can actually negotiate with and come to conclusions and to understandings. If the ideology would not change, if it will remain the same as we have seen in the last 47 years, unfortunately, I don't see any projection for a continuation in the future.
Probably, of course, you know better, but we have seen no indication that those people who are in charge of Iran have changed their attitude towards the state of Israel. Destruction of Jewish state remains their official ideology. There have been some reports suggesting that Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi and also Speaker of the Parliament, Mr. Galabaf, have been removed from the US-Israeli hit list. Any thoughts on this subject?
Well, I can't confirm. I really don't know. It's not that that I have any information which I can share with you, but. Unfortunately, again, if we were looking at the names that you have mentioned, Araghchi, we're seeing here the same way of thinking. We're seeing here people who are possessed with an ideology which calls for a destruction of a sovereign state, which do not see Israel as a country which has the right to exist, which projects threats which brings to the attacks against civilians. We see civilians getting killed in Israel on a daily basis, and this is something that cannot continue.
Ambassador, I mean, even amongst the strong and staunch supporters of State of Israel amongst European countries, and not just European countries but beyond, there is a particular point of view that for all the problems of the Islamic Republic of Iran, there are massive legal problems regarding the joint legal actions taken against it by US and Israel. And many people, many influential people are saying that on the 28th of February of this year, the threshold of imminence of danger emanating from Iran was not met, and Israel attacked first, provoking the entire conflict and drawing in the United States and creating a massive problem with the consequence of which everybody else needs to deal, including countries in this region and beyond. What would you say to that?
Well, I think that if you are looking at the facts and you see and you try to accumulate all the capabilities that Iran possessed on the 28th of February, if you take their still ongoing ideology to possess nuclear power, which comes about in a form and a shape of a military nuclear power, and their capabilities, their ballistic missile capabilities, which we have seen, that are much more developed than what we thought. The missile that was shot at Diego Garcia, which is almost 4,000 kilometers away from Iran, comes to show that their capabilities are far developed than what we have seen before. And if we look at the assistance that they gave to the proxies surrounding Israel, which also imposed a threat on on Europe. The missiles that were shot at Cyprus were coming from Lebanon, were fired by Hezbollah. And up until now, we have seen more than 5,000 rockets and drones shot and fired by Hezbollah on Israel since they have entered this military. I think that if you accumulate these capabilities together and you try to think what might have happened if we didn't take care of that, if we didn't take the step in order to eliminate all these threats, not only over Israel, but also over Europe, I think that the Europeans actually, at the end, will have to come and say thank you for seeing the United States and Israel removing this existential threat, which might have caused much bigger problems in the future, also for the Europeans.
Right to infer that, Ambassador, you are arguing in terms of preemptive logic that had we not acted in this fashion, they would have acted later. So instead of actually focusing on the imminence of danger per se, we're talking about preventing that danger from emerging at a later stage.
Correct.
Do you think it's still in line with the logic of international law?
I think that it is. I think that Israel has the right to defend itself. If we're taking the capabilities and the intention, the ideology, and we combine it together, a country cannot live under an existential threat. A country cannot live under claims or quotes coming from leaders of another country which are calling for the destruction of the state. This is something that needs to be taken care of. This is a threat that a country which looks at the West and looks at opportunities to develop the region cannot live under. And for such, this had to be taken care of, and that is the reason that Israel and the United States, which have come to understand that the future threat, which a nuclear and much more capable Iran poses on the world, should be removed.
In terms of the conduct of war and the application of international humanitarian law, there are massive questions regarding the way Iran conducts its affairs. We know absolutely for sure that some of the retaliatory measures against the Gulf region were outside the sphere of law, but also let's look at what Israel and United States have been doing regarding Iran. For example, this tragic event, the strike at the girls' school, resulting in the deaths of innocent children there. United States, I think the reports coming from there suggesting that they made a mistake. It's a big mistake, it's a catastrophic mistake. Do you think Israel also shares a degree of responsibility for what happened to those people there?
Well, first of all, unfortunately, during military campaigns, mistakes are happening and civilians are getting hurt on the way, unfortunately. But I think that if you are looking at the way that Israel is conducting its strikes in Iran, you can see that the targets which are being hit are mainly targets that are connected either to the regime, either to the production capabilities of Iran, of their military capabilities, against army facilities, while when we look at the attacks, at the missiles that are being fired at Israel, mainly the ones which possess cluster ammunition, which basically these are missiles which contain many bombs, small bombs in them, and being fired at civilian cities, and we see the destructions that it causes. You cannot compare them both. Unfortunately, we have seen also these kind of missiles being launched against holy sites. We have seen Jerusalem, old city of Jerusalem being hit, the Holy Sepulchre, Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the Wailing Wall, unfortunately, were hit by Iranian missiles, and also missiles which have hit not only Israeli cities or Jewish cities, but also Arab villages and Palestinian villages. So what I'm trying to say is that when the target is to kill as many civilians as possible, the missile does not distinguish between Muslims, Jews, Christians, because the aim at the end is to bring to as much killing as possible.
But you acknowledge that what happened regarding the Aminab school was completely catastrophic and tragic, and US and Israel should do their level best to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Well, of course, that any casualty or any civilian casualty which is involved in a military campaign is unfortunate, and this is not the case. You can see in the many ways that Israel is trying to prevent itself from hitting civilians. If we're looking, we mentioned beforehand Hezbollah in Lebanon. You can see the efforts that are being made by the Israeli IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, to evacuate civilians from areas which are going to be hit, either by sending pamphlets and letting them know, or even using technology, phone calls and SMSs, just to let people know that they should evacuate the premises. Also on buildings, sometimes buildings are being notified before the building is being hit, and if a building is hit, that's because it has either a command post or some kind of a facility which assists the terrorist organization, if we're talking about Lebanon, of Hezbollah, to continue its operation.
Ambassador, I'll come to Lebanon and other Iranian proxies, the element described widely as Iranian proxies a bit later. How important it is to the state of Israel to distinguish between the people of Iran on one side and the government of Iran system existing there? Because one of the key concerns in this country, as I understand that concern, is that, as you know, there's a sizable Azerbaijani minority there, and people, when they hear the news coming from Iran, they realize that people there are suffering massively. How important it is for you, for your country, to distinguish between the people of Iran and the system there?
Very, very important. Very, very important. The conflict or the military campaign which Israel, together with the United States, are operating is not against the people of Iran. The operation is against the regime which actually controls the people of Iran. Iran is a huge country, 90 million population, which is which lives under a terrorist regime for the last 47 years. I think that the people of Iran deserve more. I think that the people of Iran has the right to live better life. I think that the economy of Iran, which we see today, is basically does not exist, has the capability to provide its people with a better life, And the only element which prevents them from enjoying the future and the opportunities that they may have is the regime. So Israel's aim is to remove or to confront the regime and to allow the population, the people of Iran, to take control into their own hands and to determine and to set forth the future that they are entitled to have.
Footages coming from Tehran, of course, naturally, one can reasonably assume they're filtered. We can confidently assume that, but still, they show the resilience, the depth, degree of dignity. And we also know from history, Iranian people do not like external intervention? We know what happened back in 1953, we know what happened before that. Are you worried, concerned about the possibility of these joint strikes leading to the destruction of IRGC capabilities and so forth, but still giving the people there a sense of purpose and antagonizing them against foreign elements, including Israel and US?
Well, if I'm looking at what took place in Iran just a few months ago, the riots that we saw in the streets, and we saw the people of Iran, the population going out to the streets and calling and asking for a change, asking for the truthful and rightful future for them. I think that we see that, I don't know if to say the majority, but a very substantial part of the Iranian civil population seeks and wishes for a change. Unfortunately, we saw the way that the regime has handled these riots with tens of thousands of casualties. People were killed on the streets in a very brutal way. We don't know exactly how many were injured. So I do believe that there is a sense of wish among the Iranian people to live differently, to have better life, to have opportunities for the future generation, and ways to incorporate themselves into the international society.
Some Iranians that we have heard from are saying that, yeah, we have problems with our system there, we want change, but not by means of external imposition, we're going to do it ourselves. But we'll come back to that at some point later, perhaps. One more question about Nakhchivan drone strike. It happened on the 5th of March. President Aliyev reacted very swiftly, using strong language. There was an unmistakable sense of, we know what happened, we're going to do whatever we have to do. But then, of course, Azerbaijan also sent humanitarian aid as a sign of goodwill to the people of Iran. So we see the realization that what happened was absolutely unacceptable, but also we're not going to be part of the offensive campaign against Iran. That was a very clear component of Azerbaijan's point of view. Iranians are claiming that it was Israeli plan. What do you make of what happened there? Why on earth Iran should retaliate against Azerbaijan, which is not part of this conflict?
Well, that's a good question. I was not surprised to see how Iran immediately pointed their finger at Israel and accusing us for the responsibility for these vicious attacks against Nakhchivan. Unfortunately, this is something that we have seen also in the past, not taking responsibility, blaming others for their deeds. Claiming that they are going to investigate and eventually come out with the truth. It has been already almost a month since the attack, and we haven't seen any results to this so-called investigation. But we have seen also the same way of attitude, not only towards Azerbaijan and the attack against Nakhchivan. We hear also the same claims regarding attacks in the vicinity of Iran against some of its neighboring country, also against the missiles that were fired at Cyprus and Turkey also.
But that was intercepted, of course.
Yeah, of course, yeah, but I'm talking about the attitude, the Iranian attitude, blaming someone else for firing these missiles and not taking the responsibility and acknowledging that they were behind the attacks.
And one more question. What is your evaluation of Azerbaijan's stance regarding this particular situation? Months ago, even more than months ago, in January, when I was interviewing Iran's ambassador to Azerbaijan, I said that Azerbaijan and Israel enjoy vital, absolutely crucial strategic partnership. Both capitals praise this relationship. As long as there is nothing in this partnership against Iran, would Iran be content with this arrangement? Of course, Ambassador's reply was very long, extensively criticized your government using certain terminology, which I'm not going to repeat here, but there was a formal acknowledgement that, yes, we acknowledge that Azerbaijan and Israel are friends, and we respect that. What do you make of Azerbaijan's attitude towards this conflict? Azerbaijan is saying that our territory will not be used against Iran or against any third country. We're not part of this conflict. Our relation with Israel is absolutely vital. We also have good, friendly, neighborly relations with Iran. What do you make of this stance?
Well, I think that Azerbaijan is taking a very wise stand because, as you said, Azerbaijan is a neighboring country to Iran. There is the issue of Nakhchivan, there is the issue of a joint border, there is the issue of the minority, the Azerbaijani minority in Iran, which is very sensitive. And at the same hand, as you said, the strategic relations that Azerbaijan has with Israel, which lasts for more than 30 years. And the relations which are based on very close and intimate discussion between the leaders, very intimate relations between the people, based the economy is growing, the trade is growing. So I think that Azerbaijan, in the middle of trying to maneuver its foreign policy, they are doing an extremely successful way in order to try and to find the path, the right path in between, without getting too much involved with either side. And I think that Azerbaijan, in this sense, is showing that there is a way to conduct a very wise and very wise foreign policy.
Ambassador, just to understand Tehran's retaliatory space better, quite often we hear very inflaming speeches coming from IRGC commanders. Quite often President Pezeshkian, Foreign Minister Basaraghi, they speak a very civil language of diplomacy, but certain IRGC commander speaking a very strong language. For example, one of the IRGC commanders, probably 1 week ago, said that no Israeli US official will be safe anywhere in a sort of a civil place, outside a battlefield. We're going to target them. Does it mean that, I'm just asking a very hypothetical question, if you and I have a just civil conversation, have coffee somewhere else, let's say in Turkey or in Azerbaijan, you are target for them, and I could be the victim of the collateral damage?
Well, unfortunately, we have seen many times in the past where the terrorist organizations which were instructed and financed by Iran conducting their terrorist activities and crimes against Israeli interests. I can share with you, I served as a deputy ambassador in Argentina, and unfortunately in 1992 and then in 1994, both the embassy and then the AMIA building, the Jewish Communities building, were hit by Hezbollah terrorists who were funded and sent by Iran. And we had also colleagues, diplomatic colleagues who lost their lives in the terrorist attack against the Israeli embassy. And unfortunately, these are not the only examples that we have from the past. Iran is not only throwing words into the air. These threats are backed by deeds, and these deeds are unfortunately covered by Israeli blood.
Talking about Hezbollah and Lebanon, what is the likelihood of Israel feeling compelled to create a near-permanent, semi-permanent buffer zone in southern Lebanon, the territory south of the Litani River? So
we are seeing this happening as we speak. Yes, Israeli troops are functioning in the area between what is used to be called the Blue Line and now the Litani Line. We have withdrawn. In 2000, Israel has left south of Lebanon, and we hoped that the Lebanon government will take control of that area. We haven't seen that only until recently. We have started only recently to hear calls coming from the legitimate regime of Lebanon, which renounces Hezbollah and tries to proclaim that they have control, but unfortunately words are not enough, and the deeds that followed them were not enough, and Israel had to enter and to take things into its own hands. And Israel is active we have boots on the ground in the southern parts of Lebanon. And as long as we are going to see a threat imposed by Hezbollah on not only the northern parts of the state of Israel, because their missiles and their capabilities are actually are capable with threatening also the center parts, the Tel Aviv areas of Israel. Israel will continue to be active there.
We're talking about the creation of buffers and not permanent occupation, as I understand.
Well, it depends. It depends, because if we will see the Lebanese taking control as they have committed to, and being active in a way that does not allow Hezbollah to take grounds and to possess any capabilities which are threatening Israel, I don't believe that Israel has any plan or any ambition to control these areas. Lebanon is for the Lebanese.
And you justified that occupation in line with Article 51 of UN Charter, self-defense?
Correct.
My last question, Ambassador, I've got so many questions to ask. I haven't asked all of them. Just my last question, essential story, Strait of Hormuz and free passage. Will ground invasion be necessary to attain military objectives, you think? Because IRGC has proven to be incredibly resilient. The filters coming from Tehran show people are very strong, and it's very clear Iran is a very, very strong entity. What is the likelihood of ground invasion? How legal will it be, by the way?
Well, again, nobody knows, but the one thing that I can say, I don't think that deployment of tens of thousands of American troops is being carried just for the sake of pretending. We have seen that before the 28th of February with the force that was that was built up around Iran and eventually was used in the operation against Iran. Looking at the same factors and reading in the news about the deployment of troops to the area, I think that it also gives a hint on what might happen, but eventually the decision is not in our hands, it's in the hands of the president.
Ambassador Krauss, I'm very grateful to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and thank you very much for responding to all my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, as mentioned earlier, as of 28th of February 2026, the Middle East and indeed the wider world has entered a new, perhaps even qualitatively different stage. Uncertainty looms large, with outcomes bearing upon the destiny of many, irrespective of their direct involvement in this conflict. You've been watching Context, and see you very soon indeed.